Meanwhile, South Sudan's government has released 5 political prisoners in the capital, Juba. The move is one of the terms of the peace deal President Salva Kiir and the opposition groups signed last month. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
The 5 political detainees and prisoners of war are members of opposition groups. Their release is one of the conditions of last month's peace deal. The National Pre-Transitional Committee, a body tasked with reorganizing opposition groups and raising funds for the implementation of the peace agreement, has announced that all political prisoners will be released.
The ISB, acting on the order of the President, is releasing its last remaining political detainees and prisoners of war. Who have been arrested in connections with insurgency and rebellions against the state.
The release of the first 5 detainees has raised questions on the whereabouts of others arrested in connection with the war, which began in 2013.
We are not the only, but we have some detainees who have different cases.
The National Security Service says some prisoners, such as James Gadet, the former spokesperson of opposition leader Riek Machar, have not been released as they are facing criminal charges and therefore are not considered political prisoners. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
And for more on this story, let's cross over to Johannesburg, where I'm joined by Ibrahim Shabir Eddin. He's a researcher at the Afro-Middle East Center based in South Africa. Thank you for joining us on Africa Live, Mr. Eddin. Now, President Salva Kiir of South Sudan is dismissing any suggestion that he should answer for atrocities committed during the country's civil war. The ICC has been seen as a Western power used to persecute African leaders. Is it still a credible international court, though?
I think it's lost all of its credibility. I think Salva Kiir should, answer for charges, especially in terms of human rights violations. But, the ICC does seem to be lack credibility, and also, especially continentally, it's a very good ploy of deflecting attention, away from his crimes and trying to gain support for his, his attempts currently which is, to basically crack down on opposition. And so, I think it's very successful, and I think it will be successful, his claims specifically on the African continent. But I think, he does need to answer these questions.
Well, let's zero in a bit on the civil war that has raged in South Sudan. What is the best possible way, though, to get recourse for victims of the war, if it's not prosecution?
I think in South Sudan currently, because the problems are so deep, the 2 years political conflict has basically crystallized into, conflicts that are pitting ethnicities against each other. I think what we do need is we need 2 things. One, we need a proper Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Many of the ethnicization of the violence, in a sense, occurred because it didn't adequately deal with the 90s violence between the Dinka and the Nua. I think what we do, however, need is 2 things. One is civil society needs to play a bigger role in the conflict, in trying to find solutions, especially in South Sudan, the Catholic Church, which does very good work. I think that needs to be allowed to play a big role. And I think people like Kiir and Macha need to move. I think they need to be replaced for the sake of South Sudan. I think while they're still where they are, it's going to be very difficult for us to see a more holistic, substantive solution. Right now, we look at all these agreements, they're just power sharing agreements. And for real change to happen, we need proper substantive change.
Well, Ibrahim, South Sudan has just signed a rather fragile peace accord. Is an indictment against the country's leader conducive to the peace process, in your view?
I don't think so. I think, especially currently, we have to look at the balance of forces and who has the forces. And I think any indictment for both, the leader and the opposition figure, Riek Machar, I think that's very unhelpful in finding a solution. So I think we need to have a solution that, for the first thing, a power sharing is good, but I think it needs to move into a situation where where Salva Kiir and Machar are both, peacefully retired and not indicted. for proper change or more substantive change to happen. So I think, you know, any indictment right now will actually cause the conflict to worsen, especially since, you know, I mean, as we're seeing with Kiir, he's not averse to using violence to actually achieve his objectives of, you know, staying in power.
Ibrahim Shabir Dean joining us there from Johannesburg. Thank you for your insights.